Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Historiosophy today. Me and my beautiful friend Zane are out here just getting ready to talk about some serious topics. How you doing today, Zane? You have a good week?
Yeah, it was fine. My life is, I live a quasi monkish life, so there's really never that exciting. Occasionally there'll be excitement that I don't want in my life, but
Happens to the best of us, brother. Happens to the best of us. Man, last week we were talking about the political spectrums, and we got cut short a little technical difficulty with some power outages, but I wanted to kind of finish up with some of these topics. And we were discussing earlier about the different definitions of these words that we kind of go through. Last week we kind of touched on some of the definitions too. Um, I think it kind of ties into what you were talking about today, as far as defining the terms of like socialism, democracy, social democracy, communism, and you brought up some really good points. But could you kind of go over what we were discussing a little while ago about these things?
yeah, but we were just talking about capitalism as an economic system. It can be private or corporate ownership. It's not just the individual necessarily
Mhm.
of capital goods. Investments are determined by private decisions and not the state. Uh, Prices, production, and distribution are determined mainly, although not totally, by competition in a free market. Uh, a free market would be something like, I don't know, trading and bartering in feudal England. That sort of thing doesn't really exist anymore. And I absolutely do not believe in the invisible hand of the market. It's like
Why
the
would you
Holy
believe in
Ghost or
that?
something.
I think it's I mean, it's the only thing that's
It's
ever
a
functioned.
metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's not something real. It's just a
But
metaphor.
so, in other words, you're
And
saying that in a free market, things don't naturally progress the way they have, like,
I
or
say in a free market that the invisible hand that is supposed to be guiding everything toward more economic equilibrium and a better economy does not always work like that. There's no
economic.
invisible hand.
So,
There's no invisible. It's a metaphor for nothing, is what I'm saying.
but what I'm saying is, when you say economic equality, are you suggesting that everyone should have equal outcome of financial?
No, equality, I'm meaning that everybody has equal opportunity to work in the free market. Like, I'm able to own some stuff, you're able to own some stuff, we're able to trade,
Mhm.
rather than just a handful of people, like in, say, a monarchy, where it's just the royals can do it, or in some type of, oligarchy where it's just a lot of mafia who control it.
See, the way I look
Equality of
at it,
opportunity.
I see it. To me, I feel like equality of opportunity is built into a capitalist society. Um, like there's no laws preventing anyone from working with whatever voluntary contract they'd like to work in my opinion. And on top of that, the invisible hand, I think, is what, when people buy something, they're placing their vote. Every dollar is a vote. So if this company's putting out a great product and people are buying it, it's not the company's fault that equality is not, like, more people are buying this product than this product. It's because they built a better product. So those votes are going towards his product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in an ideal world, just like in an ideal world, there would be something like uh, a mystical, you know, guiding hand in free market exchange that allowed everybody's lives to improve. But in such a perfect world, we can also have pure communism where everybody just lived in bliss and shared everything. So either system would work fine in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world.
Right. But I mean, the result of a, the free market has resulted in a far superior society than a communist. Would you agree with that?
Well, a free market, so the free market is just free competition. So when has the free market started? Did it exist in medieval England?
Mm-mm.
So who controlled the prices there?
It was the individual, just like it would be their own company.
So
Like if I was,
like I'm assuming we're trading. Like if I go and I have a cow and I'm gonna trade for, you have 3 goats.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's just up to us and the government's not getting involved.
Right.
Now, there would be taxes, but taxes didn't work back then like they do now. So there wouldn't have been probably an income. I mean, there wouldn't have been a tax on sales.
Right.
So we would
Right.
be working with a free market.
Mhm.
And I suppose I'm trying to think where else the free market is. When have we had a market that has not been regulated by some type of governmental or powerful people? It could be the mafia. It could be anybody that has power above the two individuals who have argued. When have we had
Um,
that?
I think we've had largely free. I mean, there have been some regulations only for certain things, like pretty much from the Industrial Revolution up until about 1950 something. Because what ended up happening after World War II is that the government realized, hey, we could be super lucrative if we give these contracts, to certain companies, and then they give kickbacks to us, and it becomes like a self-fulfilling. I mean, even Eisenhower talked about this with the military-industrial complex. So I feel like from that point, from pretty much the creation of the United States, the government was largely not involved with um, any economic interest whatsoever other than foreign trade. And that was only so they could tax some foreign trades here and there, maybe import excise tax and things like that. But it hadn't been completely free. In other words, a completely unregulated capitalist free for all has never really existed. There's always been some sort of regulation on them. But in my
Yeah, I
opinion,
mean, maybe
minimal
maybe if you
regulation.
lived in a village or a tribe, let's say around the year 6,000 years ago,
Mhm.
and there were a group of village elders and they set down laws, but they were very basic, like you can't kill somebody, you can't or something.
Mhm.
And then if you wanted to trade with another person, like exchange, buy their daughter 100 donkeys, then the village elders would not get involved in this. And so that would be an example of completely unregulated capitalism, I guess.
Probably, yeah, probably, but on a large scale. In other words, it's worked and functioned on a large scale. Um, Now, the question is whether it's fair, and I would argue that nothing is fair. And yes, it does have its flaws as far as money, the Pareto effect we talked about briefly last week. Roughly 10% produce all the goods. It becomes in that. Luckily, we can diversify in the number of creative endeavors, but until there's something better, I don't know what else to do about that. No one knows what else to do about that.
So what
Communism
you
claims
really
to know what to do.
like is you're really interested in early 20th century style American regulated capitalism prior to the Depression, Great Depression.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so something like basically from the American Revolution to the Great Depression, the way that capitalism operated in the United States specifically is how you would like the United States to be now.
I think that was the freest time in American history. I mean, from even during the Civil War. I mean, like it was the Civil War was mostly an economic war. It was because which involved slavery, of course, but it was an economic issue. So, in other words, when the government got involved in anything, and like I said, it's not perfect, and it's not going to be. There will always need to be some sort of regulation on. I mean, you can't have an oil company just spewing oil into people's houses. So there's got to
Why
be some
not?
sort of regulation. Well, because
Why not? I mean, they do it all the time.
because that to me is a regulation that's fair. Because if you're hurting someone else, then you are that needs
So
a
you're
law.
saying that if a company, because it's probably not going to be an individual doing this, that
Mhm.
could be an individual who is producing something illegal like meth,
Mhm.
or let's pretend we're not even regulating drugs, and you're producing meth, but
Okay.
it's creating a danger for your neighbor. Then the
Right.
government should come in and say your meth lab has to be so many feet from your neighbor's house. That would be fair.
Um, well, beside the fact that meth is illegal, but
But I
yeah,
mean, it could be legal. I mean, there are
but
plenty of people who want all drugs legalized, so it
it,
could
it,
be
it could
legal.
be, it
It just
100%
happens
could
to
be.
not be.
Yeah. But if let's say if it was legal, then yeah, it would be one of those things where if you're affecting your neighbors or even the environment, in my opinion, the environment is something that is shared by all. So government regulations on things that affect the environment and the air quality and the water we drink, I think those are just regulations on unfettered capitalism. Put it that way.
So I could not set up a chemical plant next to an elementary school.
Or next to a river and spew the waste into the river, and everybody's going to drink that water.
Which is limiting my freedom in the capitalist free market system.
No, it's inhibiting you
What if it's
from.
cheaper there? What if it's going to cause me to make a lot more money doing that than to move somewhere and set up some type of water purification system?
It would still be affecting other people. So, in other words, unfettered capitalism has never really existed, except maybe in a small town barter before there was even kind of government conceptions. But to me, it's the kind of the conservative libertarian leaning view would be as long as you're not affecting someone else in their health and their quality of life, then yes is the answer.
But
So
aren't we usually to some degree affecting, like, let's say that, because I may not, let's say if I started growing vegetables and I'm selling vegetables here and I'm using up a lot of water and my neighbors don't have as much. Okay, I'm affecting them and that's bad. Let's look at
mhm,
another issue. Let's say that I am some type of international conglomerate that produces uh, uh, seed and fertilizer.
mhm,
And I have discovered that I can modify the seed and fertilizer so that my profits go up 1000%. But there are unknowns to as to what the genetic uh, you know uh, effects might be.
mhm,
And I dominate the market. 80% of the market is me and my genetically modified materials that provide food throughout the globe. Am I affecting anybody really? I mean, I'm giving people food. And we really don't know that there are any harms. There may be, but we don't know yet.
yeah, but
So
it's something like food. You know, I would argue that the FDA has done more harm than good. But I mean, there is a need for food quality, and so the way it kind of used to work, I guess, before the FDA existed, um, if somebody got sick on your food, they were liable for that. They could be taken to court and sued for those things if it caused damage to that person. So, in your example, there's still unknowns. So, like if you have a genetically modified seed and you increase your crop by 1,000%, you can sell it all over the world. But let's say if they find out in 5 years that their seeds turn people into zombies or something, like it makes them go
our men,
crazy.
half the men in the world are impotent now.
Yeah. So, is there an effect? Yeah. Can you predict those effects? No. There's no way to predict those accurately. I mean, it's impossible
Well,
to
I guess the
predict.
market will determine if they're effects. For instance, if I produce, let's say that I'm producing baby food and everything is going all right.
Right.
And then I started importing some of my materials from China and using illegal products in there.
Mhm.
And I have a reason to suspect that it would affect the babies, but it wouldn't. And then 1 million babies died. So
Mhm.
should that be regulated, or should it just be that those people can now sue me for killing their children?
To me, the only fair way to do that is you would have to be liable for those deaths. Secondly, um, the whole purpose of what the FDA and such was set up for was to regulate those, prevent those things by testing.
Mhm.
Whether they're effective or not is hard to know, because I mean
Mhm.
the FDA approved thalidomide, you know, and the
Right.
thalidomide babies were everywhere. There was millions of them. You know, the children of
So if
thalidomide.
there
There's a
had
whole
been no, so you're saying if there had been no FDA, the thalidomide would have still hit the market, but it would have
it,
been better
no, not necessarily would have been better.
to have no. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what would happen eventually is that there would be a lot of thalidomide type situations uh, with no type of FDA or FDA-like body to
Right.
regulate. And when it hit the market, like let's say that your whole family died, except for you, that would be a
Yeah,
great lawsuit,
for
but
sure.
it wouldn't really bring back your family. So most people would
No.
say it wasn't worth the lawsuit.
Well, in my opinion, but is there any way to predict the future? In other words, if even with the FDA, they approved thalidomide and there was consequence, so it didn't serve its purpose of what it was supposed to do. Is there risk? I mean, in my opinion, it would be, yeah, let the buyer beware. If you're buying an experimental seed, um, now I do agree with things like disclosure and transparency of what the FDA should be doing, which is as far as like labeling the food that you're eating, having every ingredient listed on there. I think those are positive things,
Why?
even at the cost to the company, because people need to know what they're ingesting. If you have corn that's made out of sawdust, it's not fair to sell it as corn, you know.
But now you're back to this fairness. All of a sudden, you won't give up regulation because you're worried about sawdust. I mean, that seems relatively minor compared to
No,
a
it's
system.
dishonest. I mean, but what I'm saying is you can't be dishonest in what you're selling. So in other words, I
Well,
can't
people are
go
going to be dishonest. Yeah, like
all the
drug
time.
dealers are dishonest. The drug dealers don't always say the best product. I mean,
Right. But you're buying something illegal, number one. But but
well,
I agree
that's the whole idea.
100%.
Well, because number one, it's not illegal in the U.S. And if you're buying drugs, those are
Mhm.
usually not regulated if they're illegal. Now, marijuana will be regulated in some states now, but other
Mhm.
drugs won't be. And so people who
So
sell drugs are
so
not going to really be that interested in selling you a clean product.
in this situation, so let's say, okay, you're buying drugs, you are spending money, and you have the same drug dealer all the time because you trust the guy. If you buy some drugs from one time, you get violently ill and your arm falls off. Are you going to ever buy drugs from that guy again? And secondly,
No.
is he liable for that? But you have no, I mean, since you're buying something
But
illegal, you have
right
no
now they're
recourse.
not. But if drugs were legal, then they would be regulated, so he wouldn't
Okay.
really be liable.
So, but what I'm saying is the liability is the problem. So, and there's no way to predict the future. The FDA can't do it. The market does it quicker than the FDA in most cases. But will there be laws? Like if there's a new experimental drug that makes everybody lose weight, Ozempic is an example, and they're starting to see side effects of that. Everybody bought it, everybody used it, and now they're like, okay, maybe this isn't such a good thing. Is there any way to prevent that? And I say there's no way to do that. There's no way to prevent that. The only thing you can do is have full disclosure of what's in it and require that. And I think that's a fair requirement so people know what they're buying and what they're ingesting.
Well, based on your suggestion, half the country would be lawyers. I mean, we're already so litigious a society, and it would be
Well,
armies of
frivolous
lawyers everywhere
lawsuits.
all the time.
Well, but there is anyway. There's lawyers
Well,
like
yeah, I
Trace
know.
Short.
I'm just saying, would you like to be have 10 times more lawyers than there are in the country now?
No, but I think they should
Because you would
allow.
need it to accommodate 350 million people buying products that were unregulated would
But
definitely need at least 10 times as many, maybe 100 times as many
so,
lawyers.
but the alternative is like they did with the vaccine. So they made their to where there's impossible to sue the companies that put these out. Now they're finding detrimental things happening, and people are trying to backtrack on that. Lawyers in particular are saying, yeah, we should allow them to sue for this because he had a cardiac arrest. He was a professional tennis player. He had no no history of heart problems. He gets sick of this, and now they're starting to admit, yeah, the fires in one may have caused these myocarditis, and but they don't allow them to sue them. They're not allowed to sue them because the FDA determined that. Say, oh, we're going to put this out, but you're not allowed. We're not going to allow any sort of recourse if anything goes wrong. And I don't
So
think
let me
that's
ask you
fair.
a question, a basic
Mhm.
question. Are you saying that regulation in itself is a bad idea, or that the FDA is corrupt?
No, what I'm saying is that no one could
Those are two
possibly
different
know.
questions.
Well, it's a little bit of both, but what I'm saying is there's no possible way to know, to predict the future of what if whatever product you're making is going to be 100% detrimental to society. The only way to do that is be transparent with what you're doing. So if I'm have sawdust and I'm making it into corn kernel shapes, I'm selling it as corn, that should be illegal because it's not corn. I can't put corn on it if it's sawdust. Basically that's what I'm
Or
saying.
if, let's say that I'm a small businessman and I'm barely getting by and I'm
Mhm.
selling beef, and one of my children accidentally knocked some poison in there, but I realized it's a very small amount of poison. There's some rat
Mhm.
poison. It's a very small amount of poison. It's probably not going to hurt anybody. And I just don't tell anybody and I sell it.
Mhm.
Well, as long as nobody gets sick, then that's okay.
Um, I mean, technically, yeah, as long as nobody gets sick. But I mean, they do that
Nobody got
now.
sick.
Yeah, I mean, but look at your food now. They allow the FDA allows like red 40 and yellow 90, and all these things are
Yeah.
known carcinogens, saccharin, and known
Oh yeah, for
carcinogens,
sure. For sure.
all allowed,
And
no
that's in
problem at all.
America. That's in America, not Europe. And
Right.
the more you go to a poor country, the more unregulated it is. The richer the
For
country, generally, the more regulation.
Yeah, for the most part.
Like
And
like
one thing,
Sweden definitely has more regulations on food quality than Haiti.
there's one thing I noticed in Albania, when I was living there, it was like everybody inspected their food when they eat. They would eat and they would look. I mean, they take a bite and they look again and they look and they constantly make sure that their food was okay, didn't have a hair in it or didn't have a band-aid in it or something, which I get
Or
because
dressing.
there's less trust in the people making it, as far as the I don't know what this guy's going to put in my food.
Yeah, and but and then like with a pharmacy, if there was a brand, you went to Walmart and there was a
Mhm,
new brand and the FDA was not regulating, was lowered regulations and all this.
mhm,
And there was a cheap new brand at Walmart that cost 1/10, but you didn't get paid that month.
mhm.
And your wife needs this medicine. Would you take a risk that that brand, you have no idea where it came from or what's in it, but it's either that or nothing for your wife because it's not regulated? Would you give it to your wife?
I mean, if I was in that situation, more than likely, yes. I mean, because if
Okay.
I'm desperate for it, then yeah, and then it's kind of on me as if I'm doing the right thing or not. I mean, let the buyer beware has been the staple of capitalism forever, since it's in its complete existence. Um, the buyer beware. You have to watch out for yourself. You can't trust the federal government or anybody to do what's right by you on your health. I mean, there's just no way to do that. And like I said, I mean, I agree with some regulations. Like, I don't agree with frivolous regulations. I don't want the government to determine the font length of what we have to do. Our label has to have this font, metric and
Yeah,
all
I
these things
guess
that
I'm
they
not
can do.
clear on what should be regulated and what shouldn't. Like, do you
I mean,
think firearms should be regulated in any way?
in my opinion, no, not in the least. I mean, when they talk about should you own a cannon and all the stuff like that, I think it's all irrelevant. I think a lot less people would be killed if people thought you were armed. There would be no drive-by shootings, no murders. I mean, and that's kind of the way it used to be. Like in the old West, like
Well,
people
that's
carried
the way
guns
it was when
everywhere.
I lived in. So, so we're talking about unregulated manufacturing
Mhm.
and also unregulated sales of any type of weapon, not just firearms. It could be bombs.
I mean, things like bombs are a little tricky because they affect such a wider range. But I mean, like in a perfect world, um, in my opinion, only guns are kind of covered under the Second Amendment. I wouldn't consider any weapon. Like I don't think anybody can go out and buy if a guy can manufacture a nuclear
A hand
bomb.
grenade. Hand
Hand,
grenade.
hand grenades too. I think theirs are not guns.
Okay, so you just have to decide what's a gun and what's not. and then there should be no regulation as to who can buy it or how it's manufactured.
I mean, I think it's
Okay,
smart.
well, I mean, I've known many people. I've not known many people. I've known people that manufacture guns at their house, so they could sell those guns. Now, you know, guns are never.
So,
they can always,
so
something go wrong.
do
You
you
could get hurt.
do you think that complete government regulation is a better solution?
Why does that have to be either or?
Well, at what point? Because once government regulation gets into it, then it grows eternally until it takes it over completely. There's nothing that government doesn't
Okay.
shrink.
So the reason you don't like the government, and this government regulation is just a part of the government. Obviously, there's a lot more to government than just regulating firearms. But one reason you don't want them involved in that, firearms is a good case, is because it has a tendency to grow. So once you let them regulate one aspect of it, it's going to expand until the government will have to determine whether or not you can buy a gun.
It'll never shrink. Government never shrinks
because it's organic in some way. Is this
it's a self-propagating. In other words, let's take traffic laws as an easy example. So the more I know cities that exist in Mississippi that completely exist on speed traps. The entire,
sure.
This used to happen going from LSU to.
But there's no money there. It's either that. I know those. There's no money. It's either that or nothing.
It's that, yeah. So what they've done is they've made a cottage industry with ticketing, which to me is extortion. So like, I agree with there should be traffic laws. I agree. You can't just have people driving like crazy.
I don't really, you know, it's funny. In that case, I don't think that should be regulated. I think if they want entrapment, I think entrapment in the small cities, it's like the buyer beware. You know you're going to this small town. You know if there's one thing wrong, you're going to be hit with a maximum fine. I don't think the government should come in and tell these small towns what to do. Unless they're doing something blatant like shooting people.
Yeah, no, I don't think the government should tell those small towns what to do either. But what I do think is that the growth of what the purpose of the law versus what it's become has grown. That's kind of the point of that analogy, is that it's instead of becoming just we try to protect our citizens that drive in these streets by having a speed limit, has grown into now we could pull you over for just about anything. We could say, oh, I saw your tire, it looked like it was low. Pull you over, find something wrong, find anything wrong. Oh, your window tint's just a little off. Here's a $200 fine.
Driving while black. First black person drove through town in 2 days.
Yeah. So I mean, it's grown into a cottage industry. It's grown so much. So government doesn't shrink. Every bureaucracy gets bigger and bigger and bigger until they become self-sustaining and self-propagating. Like so the IRS is already a huge group. Joe Biden expanded the IRS by 86,000 agents, which is insane. And each one of those people is making close to $100,000 a year as an agent. So does that cost justify the tax revenue that they could recover? Like that's to me is a growth of a group of government that is becomes self-propagating. It becomes its own.
Well, this is what you're saying is what an anarchist would say is that systems and government is maybe the ultimate system. You know, unless you want to talk about biology or like the earth or something. As far as the human system, government's the ultimate system. That they innately grow and grow until they take over every aspect of a person's life. And so we have to fight at the basis. That's why an anarchist would say, we don't want any government.
But that's
exactly the argument, which is a good argument, because that's the same way that this is getting off the subject a little bit, but
no, it's right on. I think it's dead on.
Tolstoy, I was reading this famous essay that he wrote. I haven't read it in years. And he was one of the first Christian anarchists. And Jacques Ellul is a philosopher that I've read a lot. he wrote in the 60s and 70s. Now, he was a theologian, but he's mostly known as a philosopher of technology. He wrote one,
Mhm.
Technological Society, which is a classic in its area. But for Tolstoy, the church is just one giant bureaucracy. And the
Mhm.
only way to get rid of it is to get rid of every aspect of church and government so that you live by just basically the Sermon on the Mount and nothing else.
Okay.
Becoming corrupt after this, like you cut everything out, the Old Testament, Paul, everything, just the Sermon on the Mount and no government. Okay, that sounds like a Christian utopia. Jacques Ellul is a little bit more sophisticated, but he's one of the ones, he's French, obviously, um, who began this home church movement. He was aligned with this idea of anarchism, that once you have a bureaucracy or an organization of any type, it becomes to grow. Now, his thinking is that efficiency, the notion of efficiency, and using humans as means toward an end, like as a machine, like to produce pyramids or to produce cars or to produce anything, like a corporation or government, is ultimately the Antichrist. It's ultimately us building towards some type of global techno dystopia. But he also
Yeah.
saw this as inevitable, so he was a determinist. So in both those cases, Tolstoy, I really, I don't know why this idea became so popular, because there was Christian anarchy and then Christian socialism, which means, of course, that you go from saying we have to live by the Sermon on the Mount to, of course, it eventually gets more organized, and then you have Christian socialism, which is where the current pope comes from. The idea that we have to devote our lives to helping the poor, and that it's a war to help the poor against the rich. Now, with Jacques Ellul, I'm more sympathetic because I do see, you see the dangerous government, and I see the dangerous technology. Like if the government had no technology, if the government was just something very primitive, I don't think they had much control. I think it's the technology that makes the government dangerous.
Yeah.
That we have to have some form of government. And I really don't mind regulation like on baby food.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
the
I
more
agree.
technology we have, the more dangerous it is. So
We
it's the
have to have.
technology aspect that I'm worried about. And that includes
I'm not.
corporations.
I am not an anarchist at all. Like I do believe we need some form of government. Um, I would argue just the opposite of an anarchist saying no government. It immediately leads to the strongest group survives, and it becomes an oligarchy right off the bat with no transitional phase. Everything else to me is a transitional phase. But the problem, like when Ben Franklin, first came out of the convention, he said, we're giving you a republic if you can keep it. And what that means is that he knows, or they knew, that government was intrinsically drawn to have more and more power. It's like a fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a fearful servant and a dedicated master, or fearful master, a dedicated servant. So the proper amount of government is good. It makes you more free because you have laws protecting your property, and you're not stuck there kind of guarding your house all the time because there's no laws on taking anything. Um, the problem is that government always grows, and that we haven't figured this out yet. We don't know how to solve that. It's the same reason that communism and socialism end up turning into these massive bureaucracies of managerialism
Yeah.
run by bureaucrats, not run by the people themselves.
Layers and layers of bureaucrats. Yeah.
It's just constant, and that's happening in the U.S. today. I mean, if you look at Britain right now, have you seen some of the news on Britain? It's in meltdown mode
Well, I
because
mean,
they've
I
had,
watch European news, but I don't know
oh
what
my
specifically
gosh,
you're talking about.
they're having riots in every city right now. Britain is going insane.
Oh.
It's like it is crazy right now over there. But I mean, the government's not doing anything about it. The government's punishing the native Britain population. If it's from anywhere else, any immigrants into Britain, the police just go stay away from them. But if you're a
Oh yeah, I've
protest,
heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Which gets
getting kind
into
of
a kind of a separate issue. I mean, there is the issue of government here,
it
but there's
is.
also the issue
Yeah,
of class and race and native
yeah.
lands and all that sort of thing. So,
It's
what
insane.
what I would say here is we're kind of getting close to the end, I guess. I don't know how much longer we
Yeah,
got.
about 5 more minutes.
Okay, is that I agree that government is a problem. The issue
Mhm.
that I have though is that I don't think capitalism is a good answer. And
It's
it
not
kind
the
of leaves me
perfect
with
answer.
nothing. It leaves me with nothing except the church. And then, of course, that is a form of government. And if I want to go with someone like Tolstoy or Jacques Ellul, I have to say, well, we just have a bunch of people living in my house, and then we won't have to worry about it. Well,
There was a
that
guy named
doesn't really seem
John.
like a good answer.
There was kind of a philosopher, and he was a political philosopher named John F. McManus. He um, he actually narrated that video I sent to you. Maybe we'll show it on here one day, or I'll put it on as a separate. I'll put that video on as a separate entity. Um, but talking about all the different forms of government, he said there's really only two. There's only two because they have this limited Republican uh, constitutional government. Because and then everything else is an oligarchy. Because when you reduce them down to their bare roots, that's what you end up with, one or the other. Because and it's very difficult to keep the republic form of government. It's effort to keep it. It's like limiting a fire. It's like building a wall around a fire. It's effort.
Yeah,
You have to
right.
constantly do it. Otherwise, everything eventually erodes into an oligarchy, and he's probably right because everything else is. Even if you're in a theocracy like you talk about, it's going to be an oligarchy.
And you're saying everything's going to roll into some type of authoritarian, totalitarian, but then those
Yeah,
can fall because those are also
yeah.
very hard to control.
And
And
the
so then you
cycle
go
starts.
back to anarchy, and then you go back to anarchy because all of a sudden, you go from living in 1984, and then all
Mhm.
of a sudden you find yourself in The Walking Dead.
Pretty much, and then the circle continues.
Walking
So
Dead is anarchy, yeah. So we'll say that 1984 is a great example of totalitarian government. Walking
yeah,
Dead is a good example of anarchy.
for sure. And what happens in Walking Dead? So the guy with the biggest bat with the nails on it kills the other guy, and he takes
Yeah,
over.
right.
So I mean, it's what happens every time. So outside of that
Which is what
cycle,
happens.
there's a constitutional republic, which is the only other thing that's ever functioned correctly, and the only thing that's made people kind of quote unquote freer. But there is no perfect solution, and I fully acknowledge that. Like, there's no perfect solution.
No, there's none. Now, of course, this is coming from a person who was born, lived through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. To
Mhm.
me, the perfect thing is a regulated capitalism along with a strong Christian background in the
I agree with
ideology of the
that.
country.
I
But
agree.
that's how we grew up. That's how we grew up. So of course we think that.
Well, I agree with that because if you see what's happening in the world that goes from that, and I'm not talking about just uh, like diversity in general. I think it's good to have other people involved, but I think everybody should have at least agree on one sort of social structure. That we all think that
Oh, I
murder is
totally agree with
bad.
that.
We all think that rape is bad. We all think that this is bad. So I think a unified moral structure, along with which exactly what you're saying, a largely free market but regulated to a point. Um,
Regulated.
yeah,
I think I
regulated
would
to
regulate it.
safety.
If I were creating my own little country, I would regulate it more than you. But I
Yeah,
would not regulate it to pieces.
right. Well, I think the regulation erodes, and that's what I'm saying. Like it becomes this bigger and bigger, bigger thing. So
And they mean economic regulation because people generally, I mean, this has come up a lot on the internet. Nobody likes the regulation of morals. Nobody likes moral regulation.
correct, correct.
I
So
mean,
I
some
mean,
people do, like in Iran, they do.
yeah, 100%, man, 100%.
Although,
Just
I don't know. I'm probably a little more conservative that I think there are certain immoral things that should be regulated.
like what?
Well, the obvious one would be murder,
Oh yeah,
rape,
yeah. Well, things like that. I
child
thought,
molestation, child molestation, uh,
yeah,
blatantly businesses that are openly scamming others, things like
right.
that.
Yeah, I agree, I think the law should be geared towards those kind of things for sure. Um,
Mhm.
so Well, let me play this for you real quick. So while we're running limited on time, I want to play one clip and get your thoughts about it. Then we can kind of wrap it up. So let me
Okay.
do this. Let's see what you think. Is that visible for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, we can't hear, but I can read the captions. Yeah, she's saying nothing. This is more word salad. It's just word salad. I'm distressed. I mean, they ask her a question about inflation, and she's talking about bread and the family being stressed out. And it's a weight that we have to carry. It's our cross to carry. She takes this very seriously. She doesn't know what she's talking about, but she takes it very seriously. And she acts nervous, even answering at this stupid level. It's not like I feel like
no,
usually if you're not really stretching your as long as you're not really pushing yourself mentally, you shouldn't be that nervous.
no. I think it's only when
You
she goes
know,
off script. If there's no teleprompter in front of her, it's just like Joe Biden. No teleprompter. It's a
but
train
at
wreck.
least you could say with him he has dementia. At least there was some excuse because
At
when he was
least,
young, he spoke off script all the time. All the time.
yeah. She just can't do it. Like I think that's why they're kind of running away from debates with Trump and such. But it's
Well,
going to
there's
be
going to
interesting next
be
year. Man.
it's good. This I have to say. I found it so funny when he went to the Black Journalists Conference convention,
Mm,
and she was supposed to show up, and she didn't show up. And I thought, okay, he went anyway. He didn't have to stay there. I mean, it's not exactly the friendliest crowd. So one woman had it in for him. The other two, not so much. The
mhm.
host. You saw this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and she attacked him. And he was just like, whoa, this you are a nasty, you're a horrible, you're the nastiest person I've ever had to deal with. Because he just says, what he's thinking. But his
Yeah,
good point was, and I agreed with him, when did she become black? Like he said, I've known of her. I don't know her personally, I've known of her for years. And she
yeah.
was always the first Indian American this, Indian American that, Indian American this. And all of a sudden, she became black and she goes to Atlanta and puts on this Southern accent.
Oh my
She
God,
has nothing to, she has no connection in any some way. Her husband is
it
Jewish.
was
He
so,
has no connection to the
so
South.
cringe. Yeah,
It was so cringe. And then she has this fake Southern accent, talking about we y'all and
yeah.
well, we know what we all this
Oh,
it
she was
sounded
getting
like
spunky. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. And then she had that horrible Megan the Stallion up there, who
Hmm.
was, I just no talent, and vulgar.
It was
And I thought this
awful.
is how you want to open up your this is how you want to start it, with
They're 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 defending her in the mainstream news now. They're saying, "Oh, well,
yeah, but you know what?
she
A lot of
identifies with
a
everything
lot of
like."
black journalists and all. Another thing is it's insulting to black people to think, oh, let's start our conference in Atlanta. What do people want to see? They want to see twerking.
Yeah,
So we're just going to twerk a lot, and all the black people will be happy and vote for me. That is so insulting.
it really is. It really is. Like
Yeah, I mean,
they don't
it's
address
the
any issues.
lowest common denominator.
It's horrible. Yeah,
Now,
they're
some people would
defending.
say Trump does the same thing in the South. He goes to these conferences, I mean, these rallies in the South, and it's like,
Nowhere near as bad.
we
I mean,
can have all the pig's feet and go to
no,
NASCAR. He's not as
no,
bad, but sometimes
no.
he puts it on like,
Yeah,
but not as bad. That was so phony. And her attempt at
the
black Southern
pandering.
speak was, yeah,
Yeah,
pandering. Yeah.
the panderverse.
Um,
Yeah, she was
yeah.
horrible.
If Trump wasn't himself already, so I don't know what you want to count. He plays the fool at times. So if he didn't do that, then it would be easier to attack her for it.
Yeah. No, well, she's
You know what
got
I'm saying?
the media completely behind her because they're
Well,
defending
I
her,
don't even
saying
watch that. I don't
well,
even
they're
watch that
saying
video.
They're saying she's such a she can relate so well to people that she's a chameleon. That's why we don't even care or know what race she is. She's that good. And I'm like going, wow, okay.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, they should share her theme song. They could do that old Culture Club song, Karma Comedian. That could be her theme song.
Right. The Karma Chameleon. That's a perfect way to end this.
And it's on Kamala. Kamala, Kamala. How would you say it?
I think you made a perfect meme, buddy. You should make that video and we'll put it on the internet.
Yeah, that is good. I should send that into Trump. See if he wants
to say that's perfect. That's really good. Really clever, man. I love it. Man, I enjoyed our conversation today, buddy. We'll take a pause.
All right, enjoyed it.
Next week, man.
All
everybody
right.
out there in digital world, make sure you like and subscribe for more conversations like this, and we will see you next week.